I figured we could maybe start with a guided meditation shortly. Um, and in the context of what you're writing about with real change and how we can heal ourselves and the world, I just want to offer a quick story that I found very relevant uh, to what I wanted to do a couple of weeks ago. I wanted to lead an online meditation for like Black Lives Matter, and to dedicate a loving kindness meditation for racial equity. And I announced it online. I said, we're going to be doing a loving kindness practice for this issue and for Black lives. And I got a lot of pushback, and it was surprising to me. It was shocking to me how much pushback I received, that people were saying that either, well, all lives matter, or what good can you do with a meditation? What does it mean? Why don't you put this into action? Or this is self-serving in some way. I got many different kinds of pushback, and I was very surprised. And in your book, you actually shared a story that you had a similar experience where you got a lot of pushback from people saying similar things. And I found, you share a couple of tweets that you shared stating some of the context of what you mean, or what your intentions are with the guided meditation, and how it can impact our fight for real change. And so, just quoting you in the book, you say that, and I modified it very slightly, but you say basically that I offer this meditation to remind myself not to disconnect from what is happening. It's so much less painful to look the other way, but this is vital. I would never suggest that meditation, prayer, or positive thoughts are a replacement for action. But I know I need to connect to something bigger repeatedly to have energy to keep acting. And so I feel like that clarification is useful for a lot of us who may not understand the link between our own mindfulness practice and doing this together as a collective community, and linking that to real change. And so I know I've been talking a lot right now, but I have to be very helpful for my own sake, and I feel like that context may be helpful for others as well. And so I invite you to see if you would be comfortable sharing a guided meditation, perhaps anchoring in a sense of belonging for us and welcoming home to ourselves as we get started.
Sure, and maybe I'll just respond to the content of what you said a little bit. The meditation I was proposing on Twitter actually was the suggestion of somebody else, and I thought, oh, this could be really powerful and helpful. So it was metta, METTA, meaning loving kindness, a metta minute for the kids who were in cages in detention centers at the border. And I was actually at an airport when I got somebody put on Twitter the suggestion directed to me, and then I wrote back and said, well, yeah, that's interesting. I'm on my way home. I'll see if I can get a script together and record something. And I did. And it went up a few days later when I was back at an airport. That's where I did my minute. And there was a fair amount of pushback. So it was, just as you said, people saying you're as bad as the people who just do thoughts and prayers and never do anything. And why aren't you donating money? Why aren't you sitting in somewhere? And I said exactly what you read, because it is hard to really bear witness to suffering and have enough energy to want to do something about it. And we see the most caring people who are on the front lines of suffering, whether as caregivers, medical personnel first responders, who I'm, these days doing a fair amount of work with ambulance drivers, people like that, or activists who are really trying to create some kind of systemic change, is not easy. And we see people burning out left and right because it is not easy. And we need these people. We need really their activity so tremendously. And so I've thought deeply about what helps us keep going, what allows us to sustain a kind of energy or effort when you don't get immediate results right away, or it's a long haul of effort. And for me to try to make a difference, and that might mean in your family, it might mean in your neighborhood, it might mean in your community, it might mean in the country, it might mean on the planet. And the manifestation of the effort could be very different. And it's something I really tried to emphasize in the book. That part was based on a conversation I had with Bell Hooks, who's a kind of iconic feminist writer. And I told her, because we're friends, that I'm used to Buddhist scholars who, as you know very well, will parse the exact word and be all fussy and like pick it apart and change the vocabulary. And I told her she was even worse, which I think she is, which is probably why she's such a great writer. And she said to me, I was in the process of writing the book, she said, I don't like the phrase social action because I think it sounds like it's only limited to marches and protests and things like that. She said, what about art? What about creativity that takes us beyond the conventional or the convenient and has us dare to imagine something different, dissolves boundaries, So anyway, that's a bigger term than we normally give credence to. And if you are engaged in that way, then I think we really do need practices that will sustain us and will help us keep going. And when you say belonging, the way I am often talking about that precise thing these days is rest. It's some place of awareness where we're not trying to manipulate our experience and we're not trying to fabricate anything. We can just rest. And there we find a sense of home right there. And so this is really embedded in very classical practice as well. And it's a very powerful thing to do. It's also the kind of thing, amongst many things, that we can talk about that feels wrong. It just feels selfish and weird. Like, I can't do that. There's so much happening. It's so urgent. And there is so much happening. And nonetheless, we have to be able to hang in there in a more sustained way. And so the word rest is really very prominent in my own thinking and teaching these days. And it's funny because it is a really classical instruction, like rest your attention. Let's say you're using the breath. Rest your attention lightly, like a butterfly resting on a flower. And I remember 10 years ago, actually, I wrote a book called Real Happiness, which has a lot of guided meditations in it. And when I turned it into the editor the first time and I got it back, she said, you're using the word rest a lot. Are you very tired? And I said, well, probably, but that's also the word. So I'd like to have us do a meditation where we are practicing that element of rest and just kind of finding a home in our actual experience. And so very commonly when that's done, as I'm sure many of you know, we choose an object of awareness, we rest our attention on it. When our attention wanders, we see if we can let go and come back. Like no judgment or blame, just see if you can let go and come back. And that home base, that central object, very commonly is something like the feeling of the breath, the actual sensations of the breath. It's always present for us. It's available when we're then out, commuting or whatever, as a place of return. But it doesn't have to be the breath. It may be for physical reasons or emotional reasons. The breath is not serving as that kind of restful place. And so we would then say, well, that's fine. It's not a secondary practice to do something else. Just choose something else, another sensation in your body, something like that, where you don't have to make it happen. It's happening anyway.